Excuse me. I hope the video is visible to you guys. Check.
Atlantis Empire, also known as the Owners, and Timasius Cargo Lines, or TCL, also known as the Charterers, entered into a box time charter party dated 18th July 2016 in respect of the vessel J. Momoa. The charterers had to ship refrigerated fruits to their customers and used J. Momoa for the same. The refrigerated bananas were shipped in TCL's reefer containers from Guayaquil, Ecuador, which was the port of loading, to St. Petersburg, Russia, which was the port of discharge. The voyage period was from 4th of July 2018 to 30th of July 2018. As multiple consignments of the cargo was found damaged after the shipment, a cargo survey report was prepared by Athanasius Kircher surveyors. According to AKS report, there were temperature fluctuations in a particular reefer container, causing over-ripening of the refrigerated bananas during the voyage. From the report, it appears that the fluctuation occurred due to container malfunctioning and/or inadequate monitoring of container temperature. Periods of power shortage were also seen to have occurred. Now, who is to blame? The owners, that is the Atlantis Empire, or the charterers, that is the TCL? A chain of correspondence took place between the two parties wherein they played a blame game. TCL claimed lack of due care and diligence by Atlantis and the crew, and Atlantis, in response, denied these allegations and put the blame back on charterers' faulty reefer containers. When TCL demanded a recovery compensation of $89,918.42, the owners denied this claim, and then this led to the arbitration that we are in. Thus, the primary issues so raised in this arbitration are as follows. Firstly, whether or not the owners have taken due care of the reefer containers. Secondly, whether or not the owners were expected to have advised the charterers when the reefer container malfunctioned. Thirdly, whether or not the charterers gave due notice to the owners regarding the claim amount.
Good evening. Welcome to the 7th edition of National Law University Odisha, Bose and Mitra and Company International Maritime Arbitration Moot 2020. We have here with us the two finalist teams, Nalsar University of Law, which is representing the claimants, and Symbiosis Law College, Pune, which is representing the respondents. Without any further delay, we will commence with the rounds. Thank you.
If the members of the tribunal are ready, the council may start.
Please.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Good afternoon, respected members of the tribunal. This is counsel representing claimants, Timus Cargo Lines, TCL, in the dispute between Atlantis Empire and Timus Cargo Lines. The council 1 will be mainly dealing with issue 1 for the course of 22 minutes, and my co-counsel will be dealing with issue number 3 and 4 for the course of 20 minutes, and we will be keeping 3 minutes for the rebuttal. If the members of the tribunal are well versed with the fact scenario, the council would seek permission to move to the submission.
Yes, please.
With respect to jurisdiction, the tribunal formed under clause 20 of the Charter Party have jurisdiction to hear the present dispute, as it is a negotiated charter parties and the parties consented to be governed by such arbitration tribunal whenever the dispute arose. Further, the opposition councils in their written submission have not challenged but conceded to the jurisdiction of the present tribunal. Therefore, the council may seek permission to move to the merits of the dispute.
Yes, please.
The council's main issue would be to prove how ship owners failed in their part of the agreement with respect to taking care of the containers and the cargo. For that, the council will be taking the respected members of the tribunal through all the relevant clauses in the Charter Party and simultaneously establish facts which will point out to the negligence and lack of due care in the part of the ship owners with respect to agreement of the Charter Party. To begin with, if the members of the tribunal may please refer to clause 17A2 of the Charter Party on page number 18 of the Charter Party. The council may read it for the members of the tribunal. The clause 17A2 states that it is the owner's responsibilities / liabilities to ensure to properly and carefully carry, keep and care for the goods and the container while on the boat. Now, the members of the tribunal would like to take notice of the two words, that is, properly and carefully. These two words have been intentionally incorporated in the Charter Party because the word properly adds value to the word carefully. That is, it is not just mere a duty of care, but a responsibility in the light of the knowledge of all the relevant facts related to the cargo. In the present situation, the cargo at hand is temperature sensitive cargo. That is, it was required to be carried at 13.6 degrees Celsius throughout the voyage. However, the ship owners failed in their duty to do so, and the council would establish that with the help of two sublims. The sublim 1 will be how the ship owners did not monitor and address the temperature increase in a timely manner. The sublim 2 will be how the ship owners failed to ensure continuous supply of power which they were obliged to do. Moving to the sublim 1, if the members of the tribunal may please refer to clause 11D of the Charter Party on page number 16. The council would read it out for the members. Clause 11D is with respect to refrigeration, and it clearly states that the owner shall ensure that all the refrigeration facilities as described in part 3 are maintained in good working order throughout the currency of the Charter Party. Now, members of the tribunal, the basic assumption behind any good working refrigeration facilities is that it maintains the required temperature, which in our case was 13.6 degrees Celsius. Now, the members would like to read this specific clause with clause 17B of the Charter Party on page number 19 on the left hand side. Clause 17B on page 19, which states that the owners shall monitor and record the performance minimum once daily of all the reefer units and the refrigerated containers. Now, the council would establish that how the ship owners failed with respect to these obligations which were casted upon them. If the members of the tribunal may please refer to page number 107 of the fact sheet, it would take them to the temperature logs. If the members of the tribunal are with me, page number 107, if we see 10 July temperature logs, the temperature starts rising on 10 July itself. And from 11 July 2 a.m., the temperature starts rising continuously. And the temperature continues to rise for the period of more than 60 hours till it is taken into notice on 13 July. The temperature rises on 13 July till 21.5 degrees Celsius, whereas the required temperature for the temperature sensitive cargo was supposed to be 13.6 degrees Celsius. Now, had the ship owners been monitoring the units minimum once daily, they would have obviously noticed the rise in temperature on the morning of 11 July or on the morning of 12 July. However, the notice was only taken on 13 July, as is evidenced by the Malreef report. Further, a similar instance can be taken into notice on page number 111 of the chart of the fact sheet. If the members may kindly refer to the logs of 27 July. Now the logs clearly says that temperature starts rising on 27 July, if the members are with me, around 8 a.m. The temperature continues to rise for more than 46 hours till 29 July, and it is finally on 29 July that it is taken care of. Now, had there been regular monitoring of the temperature by the ship owners, as was required by the charter party under clause 17, the ship owners would have taken note of the temperature increase on the first day of the temperature increase itself. However, this was not the case. The council would draw an analogy to the case and establish how the facts were similar and what the judges observed in that case. In a case where the meat was transported and there were excessive and irregular temperature fluctuations, in the case of Foreman's and Elam Limited versus Federal Navigation Company, the judges observed. I will read out the lines for the members.
Can you just give me the citation of that?
Sure. The citation, one second, I'll just refer. The citation is 1928 2 KB 424. It's mentioned on page number 180 of the compendium as well. And the council would read the relevant part. The judges observed where the meat was transported and there were excessive temperature fluctuations. The judges observed that the excessive and the irregular temperature fluctuations would indicate prima facie negligence or default in the care of the cargo on the ship, because the primary duty in carrying any refrigerated cargo is to maintain proper required temperature and proper refrigeration facilities. The council submits this was not done in the present case, as there was inadequate monitoring of the temperature rise, which led to the damage of the cargo. The council would now move to the second sublist to show how the ship owners also breached their second duty. The council submits that the ship owners breached their duty to provide continuous supply of power. If the members of the tribunal may kindly refer to clause 17b again on page number 19, left hand side. And if the members are with me, or I will read it for the members of the tribunal. The clause says that the owners shall be responsible for provision of electric power. Now, it has also been observed in a case where the judges observed that the refrigerated cargoes must be kept off power for the least possible time. Otherwise, owners can be held liable for the damage to the temperature sensitive cargoes. the judges observed that the maximum permissible time for the power off, either due to technical or the operation glitches, can be from 1 hour to 3 hours depending upon the goods. And it was cited in the case itself that for the controlled atmosphere and the cold treatment, the power should not be off for more than 1 hour. And in the case of containerized goods or the chilled cargo, it should not exceed 3 hours.
Which case are you referring to?
This case is Export Dora Valley, SA versus AP Moller Mask, and it is cited on page number 139 of the compendium for the members' reference. In this case, the grapes were being transported. Even they were fruits, like in this case, the bananas were, and the judges observed clearly that how the power off can affect the cargo and how it should be for the minimal amount of time. Now, if the members of the tribunal may kindly refer to page number 121 of the fact sheet, it will take...
Counsel, sorry, just to interrupt. So the other case you referred to for the grapes was actually when power was not supplied to the container, correct?
Yes, Madam Arbitrator.
So here, when we're talking about the power off, where are you referring to that the power was discontinued to be supplied? Are you referring to the reefer logs where it says power up and down?
Yes, Madam Arbitrator, the reefer logs, I'll show it, page number 121.
Right.
The event log.
Right, so that is power up and down. So the event log is for the reefer monitoring log. It's attached to that, correct?
Yes, Madam Arbitrator.
And who provided the reefer monitoring log?
Madam Arbitrator, the duty to monitor and provide the log was on the ship owner.
Correct. That is fine. But this is not the monitoring logs of the vessel. This is the reefer monitoring log.
Yes.
So
Madam
who submitted this one?
It is produced automatically through the when the container is working.
Understand, but so it is provided by the container, correct? Technically,
yes.
It's issued by the container. And who does the container belong to?
Container belongs to the charterer.
Right. So, which means your charterers, your clients, had access to the log with them all along because it's automatically generated.
Yeah, Madam. Yes, Madam Arbitrator, but it was the duty because the charterers were not present on the ship themselves, but it was the master and the...
This is generated by the container, and it's an online generated log. So
yeah, it is generated on the ship's computer on which the charterers were not present.
Are you sure it's generated on the ship's computer, or is it generated on the reefer container?
The container itself was on the board, and to which the charterers did
Right,
not have access.
But have you noted the anatomy of a reefer container? So it has its own system which has satellite connection and supplies its own logs to the owners of the container so they can trace and track the containers at all times. So this was in the charterer's hand, your client's hand.
Madam Arbitrator, with respect to that, the council submits that even in the temperature log, it is evidence that there was no power supply. And in the Mallory's report,
it says power up and down, which actually could be a malfunctioning of the reefer itself.
Yes,
and not necessarily the vessel's power, because in which case there would have been multiple claims for multiple containers on the ship. Do you have any copies of any of those complaints from if it was a vessel's issue?
Madam Arbitrator, even if it was the problem in the container itself, the power is usually supplied from the vessel itself, right? And it is given to the provided to the reefers.
Now, right. If the reefer was malfunctioning, it wouldn't have been able to accept the power.
The very situation was kept in the minds of the parties when the charter party was drafted, that there can be malfunctioning of the container when it is on the voyage, and for that very particular purpose, clause 17A2 was incorporated by the parties, which states that it will be the owner's responsibility to take care of the cargo and the container on board. Therefore, what the council is trying to establish it, even if there was default, if the unit of the container tripped because of which there was no power supply, it was the obligation on the ship owners to regularly not just record but maintain the logs. The
So
price,
have we been provided with the manual logs on the ship that were taken by the crew?
yes, Madam Arbitrator.
Do we have the manual logs?
We have been given the temperature logs and the
That is from the chart. No, that is from the charters. I'm asking about the vessel's log. Whether so the vessel, the chartering logs are ones. The reefer logs which you have are provided by the charterer. But have we the manual ones that are physically taken down by the crew?
Yes, Madam Arbitrator, as far as the council knows, from page number 105 to page number 115, the logs which are generated are by the ship owners and the logs which follow them. That is the event logs.
The TCL marked.
Yes, Madam Arbitrator.
That's generated by TCL.
Sorry, Madam Arbitrator, the council admits that I was not clear with this particular aspect. However, the very point, the point of this very much establishes what the council has been trying to say, that there was no provision of power, like there was not power in the container from.
Correct. My point here is actually leading to this. So the charterers had the logs with them because this was obviously noted by them from online and they had it with them. So even though they knew there was malfunctioning, how come they didn't do anything about it? I mean, isn't mitigation on both parties, mitigation of losses?
Madam, as per the mails which have been exchanged between the parties, it has been, according to the facts which are there, it is stated that the charterers did not have knowledge of the logs, or the information was not provided to them in the timely manner, as it is clearly laid out in the charter party that this particular duty, that is recording the temperature, monitoring it, and to ensure there are no fluctuations for such long duration, is on the ship owners themselves. Therefore, the charters did not have information of the same and therefore could not take the accordingly action. Further, the council would like to emphasize on the point that it was the ship owner which was present on the ship through the master and the vessel. Therefore, the charters did not have the timely information, and the council would establish that if the council is allowed to proceed, it will become more clearer if the Madam Arbitrator allows. Madam Arbitrator, so the case was to ensure that the refrigeration facilities are working properly, that is, the temperature has to be maintained. According to clause 17b, the power had to be continuous supplied. Even if there was malfunction in the container, clause 17a2 was incorporated for the very same purpose, that ultimately the temperature should not fluctuate beyond a certain extent, because it may happen due to other reasons, but that reason, that is, if it is container, has to be taken care of by the ship owners themselves. Further, the council would emphasize on this point by submitting that on page 2 of the written submission of the ship owners, in their written submission, that is in their memos, they have pointed out that their master in the starting checked on all the containers and they found that the containers were in proper condition. Further, page number 75, if the members of the tribunal may please refer to.
Sorry, so when you say they checked the containers were in proper condition, do you know what checks were done and what needs to be done? Was it apparent good condition, or was it actually opening and testing of each container? Because that seems kind of
Madam Arbitrator, the council is just pointing to the submission of the ship owners themselves in their written submission with this
So what is the duty? So if I was a ship owner and you're representing your clients and your clients gave me a container, I looked at it, there was no physical damage, I would mark it as okay. So what exactly were you looking for further than that? What were your clients looking for?
Madam Arbitrator, usually when we put the containers on board, what is looked at, all the things are working properly. There are the packages in which there were packings in Banavac bags, and the system, the facilities which were.
I'm sorry, but I don't think the owner has a right to open any container.
No, I'm not talking about the owner. I thought, the council thought that the question of the Madam Arbitrator was, what are the required checks when we have to see how the container is when
not your clients, but the owner. You said the owner accepted the containers in apparent good condition, correct? That was your point.
Yes, Madam Arbitrator.
So what checks? You would have just seen it physically from outside, right? But in reality, who does the burden fall on to provide a sound container which is worthy of cargo?
It falls on the charterers themselves. And if Madam Arbitrator would look on page number 75, it talks about survey report with respect to the containers. The container details are mentioned there. And
75 of what?
Yes, Mr. Arbitrator.
75 of?
75 of the fact sheet. It will take Mr. Arbitrator to the survey report with respect to the container.
75 of the
I think she means the case study itself. Is that it?
Yes.
Case study page 75 is transit.
Page 75
of the case study.
Yeah, above transit is the condition of the container. And it is stated that the condition of the container was sound.
Council, can I take you please to the first page of the survey report, which is...
Yes, Madam Arbitrator.
What is it? It's just 73, I think. Yes.
Yeah, 73.
Yes. Could you please read the paragraph above general information?
Can the council ask for an extension of 90 seconds to wrap up the submission and answer the question?
Sure.
Yes, Madam Arbitrator. The what paragraph is Madam Arbitrator referring to?
It's just under, so it's under the tabulated details and just above stage 1, that the middle, it's called AKS comments.
Yes, Madam Arbitrator. In it, the surveyor mentions that it was higher than expected temperatures which led to ripening of the fruit, and he also points toward the pre-shipment.
Sorry, you haven't read the whole paragraph there.
Why don't you just read the 4 paragraphs, very short paragraphs.
Sure. Cause of loss, ripeness, and soft green. One of the 17 containers on bill of lading, no other reported issues. Container gated in for export 2nd July 2018. Data logger starts 29 June with return air within 2 degrees Celsius of the set point after 40 hours. On 3 occasions lasting between 21 and 38 hours on 4th and 5th, 12th and 13th, and 28th and 29th July, supply air is higher than the expected air up to 21.5 degrees Celsius. Return 22.7 degrees Celsius. At such time, container is on the vessel. During these periods, logger record alarm code 15 loss of cooling. In our opinion, higher than expected temperature has led to soft, green, and ripening of the fruit during the course of the transit. Pre-shipment issues of anthracnose, cigar end rot, and crown rot reported by the surveyor are likely to have been exacerbated as a result. Work order
So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. So the likely cause of damage is also probable pre-shipment issues.
Yes, Madam Arbitrator.
So if you're aware of, I'm not sure if you've gone into it, but if a fruit ripens, I'm aware that your time is up. I'm going to grant you an extra minute if that's okay with the other judges.
Yeah, that's
other
fine.
members, right? So if you note that the higher temperature is caused because of ripening of fruit, so the rise in temperatures internally could also be because of the actual condition of the cargo and not necessarily because of the reefer itself. So that means your clients unnecessarily settled a claim which they shouldn't have. It could have been pre-shipment issues.
Madam Arbitrator, the bananas were packed in banana vac bags, which means that particular packaging does not allow, even if in a particular pack the bananas had some issue, the gas is not released out of the particular bananas, out of the particular package.
Out of the pack, but then if they had pre-shipment issues and were within a vacuum thing, then temperature increase is very probable.
Further, there is ethylene tube which is fitted, which usually sucks out all the ethylene gas, which can lead to the increase in temperature. Therefore,
but if it's a banana vac thing, it can't. If it's a pre-ripened fruit, it can't do that.
Madam Arbitrator, first of all, the council would submit that even in the survey report itself, it's not held that in that particular container all the cartons had the specific pre-shipment issues. Even if they were pre-shipment issues, the report clearly says it has been exacerbated as a result of temperature fluctuation. And as the council pointed that the temperature rose to a point of 21.5 degrees Celsius. And
that's because of ripened fruit. Right, okay. Let me also bring this up. The first line says 1 of 17 containers had an issue on the same BL, which is your client's issued BL. So 1 of 17 containers were affected. So why does it boil down to this particular container? What did the owners do wrong that this particular container, the power issue doesn't seem to be affecting any other containers?
Madam Arbitrator, this is the point. If there were temperature fluctuations with respect to one container, there were power supply problems to one container, that had to be taken care of. Because ultimately,
right.
Further, this is the basic main submission of the council, and the council in the end would also like to highlight that the basic exception of inherent vice cannot be taken when the ship provided in the first place is unseaworthy. And unseaworthiness also extends to cargo worthiness. And in the case of Maury King, it was also held that seaworthiness does not just mean that the ship must be seaworthy, but it also extends to refrigeration facilities.
But at what stage was the seaworthiness obligation put forward?
Mr. Arbitrator, usually...
Read your clause 7, if you read your charter. 17A.
Yes, Arbitrator.
What is the obligation on the carrier for seaworthiness?
It's usually before and at the...
We're not in usually. You got a contract. Let's see what the contract says. Let's read the contract.
It says before and at the beginning of the voyage. However, the council submits that because the refrigeration machinery did not provide because the refrigeration facilities were not proper even during the voyage, and the vessel was not able to
just pausing there. The refrigeration facility is your container.
Yes.
Our supply was coming from the ship owner.
Yes, Mr.
So are you now saying that you're admitting that the refrigeration facility was not in good order?
No, Mr. Arbitrator. The council wants to emphasize on the fact that as per the clause 11D, the owner shall ensure that the refrigeration facilities are in good working order. All the council wants to submit, as the council is short on time, is that the first liability under which the charterers are holding ship owners liable is under clause 17A2, because it clearly talks about the taking care of the containers and the cargo while on board. However, if this liability can be extended to 17A1 if the seaworthiness is agreed to extend to cargo worthiness also, that is, the cargo must be carried in a proper stage. Therefore, the council, if there are no further questions, would like to conclude that because there was no proper monitoring, at least minimum once daily, which was the obligation of the ship owners, the power was not continued supplied because there were 4 instances when the report shows that there were power loss, and because the charterers were not informed of this in a timely manner. Therefore, the goods suffered the damage were exacerbated, and the ship owners failed in their duty to take care of the cargo and the container according to clause 17A2 of the charter party. Thank you.
Thank you.
Members of the tribunal, am I audible?
Yes.
Members of the tribunal, this is counsel number 2, appearing on behalf of the claimant, PLC. The council's first submission will be dealing with issue 2. That is, the respondents were responsible to advise my client on reefer malfunctioning. Members of the tribunal, the charter party serves as the foundational basis to decide the rights and liabilities of both the owners and the charterers. I would direct you to a specific part of clause 17B of the charter party on page 19 of the fact sheet. And I would read the important part for the members, that the owners shall endeavor to repair and rectify any breakdown, fault or deficiency in the refrigerated machinery. Endeavor itself in the Black's Law Dictionary has been said to mean a systematic or continuous effort. It's clear here that 17B imposes a liability on the respondents to rectify and repair any malfunction in the reefer containers. Members of the tribunal, I would also show you two parts of 17B in the standard box time charter party that have been struck out to better establish the intention of the parties while entering into the contract. If you see the word only from the phrase, the owners should provide power supply only has been struck out. Further, the first part of 17B that limits the responsibility of the owner to that of only supplying of air at the required temperature has also been struck out. It's clear that there was a conscious and deliberate attempt on part of the parties while framing the charter party that the owner's liability be not restricted and be extended to repairing and rectifying any issues with the refrigerated machinery. Members of the tribunal, it is also submitted that the charterer's instructions were very clear that the temperature should be maintained to a set point of 13.6 degrees throughout the voyage. As my co-counsel has already established, in various instances, it is clearly seen that there was no monitoring. For example, on the 11th of July, on the 12th of July, and repair was only done on the 13th of July. There was clear failure on the part of the ship owners to fulfill this specific obligation under 17B. Members of the tribunal, it's important to note that the primary master of the crew shall remain the ship owner. This is because the ship owner is the one who employs the crew and the crew are on his payroll. Hence, any negligence on their part to fulfill the specific instructions of the charterers should be a liability of the ship owner. Members of the tribunal, if you also refer to clause 15F of the charter party on page number 18 of the fact sheet, I would read out the relevant portion here, that nothing contained in the charter party shall be constructed as a demise of the vessel to the charterers, and the owners shall be responsible for the acts of the crew. It is very clear here that the respondents cannot make the argument that the vessel's crew were acting on our instructions, because at the end of the day, they will be the ones responsible for neglect in following these instructions. If the members of the tribunal don't have any questions, I would like to move on to my next submission. The second issue the counsel is arguing is that my client did indeed notify and inform the respondents of the claim in a timely manner. I would be arguing this issue in three sublims. First, I would be briefly dealing with the fact that my client informed the owners within the time period allowed by the charter party. Second, I would be justifying why the owners were not invited to the survey report. And finally, I would be showing how my client fulfilled their obligation under clause 16H of the charter party. Firstly, if the members of the tribunal would direct their attention to clause 17D of the charter party on page number 19. Clause 17D clearly says that and gives a time frame to my clients that they can inform and notify the owners of any claim within 24 months of delivery of goods. 24 months is the timeline mentioned here. The voyage in this case ended on 30 July, and my client via the first mail dated 16th January 2019, available on page 9 and 10 of the fact sheet, clearly informed the respondents of the claim. Hence, this is within the time period allowed in the charter party. Members of the tribunal.
If you could just read for me clause D, 17D.
The owner shall be discharged from all liabilities under the charter party in respect of claims for which extension of time has not been sought and obtained by the charterers unless notice of arbitration in accordance with clause 20 is given within 24 months of delivery of goods.
Yeah, but that's for invocation of arbitration. But you just said that that covers also your the other condition which requires you to give notice.
Mr. Arbitrator.
For discharge of the owner's liability.
So the notice of arbitration in this case was issued on the 19th of November 2019. This as well is within the 24
Your argument is on something else you're making. Your argument is on why the owners need not, why you have complied with the requirement of giving notice to the owner for the claim as envisaged on the charter party about the actual damage claim, not the owner's right being discharged, not your right being discharged rather.
For this, I would directly jump to my third limb to answer the arbitrator's question and come back to my second limb about the survey report. If the arbitrators would turn to page 16H, to clause 16H of the charter party, on page 18 of the fact sheet. Clause 16H lays out the charterer's responsibility with regards to claims authority. And it states that the charterers shall make no payment in excess of $3,000, which we have done here, without prior consultation of the owners. Here I would like to establish, by looking at the facts, how we have actually fulfilled our obligation. On 16th of January, my client clearly informed the respondent of the claim.
16th of January, which year?
13.
Sorry?
9 and 10, the first mail, dated on page 9 and 10 of the fact sheet.
Yes.
Mr. Arbitrator, it is submitted that in this case, clause 5 of the terms of carriage available on page 64.
To which I'm not a party, to which the owner is not a party to.
That is exactly my point, Mr. Arbitrator. My client is legally bound to make the payment under a separate contract. Hence,
what stopped you from? Let's just read clause 16D.
16.
Whichever, not sorry, 16D.
16H.
16H. Sorry.
Yeah.
16H. Just read clause 16H.
The charterer shall make no payment in excess of the amount as stated in box 32, $3,000 in settlement of a claim for which they intend to seek recovery from owners without prior consultation of the owners.
So just pausing there. First is the charterer shall make no payments. You're not to make any payment without prior consultation with the owner. Correct?
Yes.
Now come to your letter of at page 10, your first letter, and read the third last paragraph. You're saying this is your intimation or consultation. You say, hence kindly refer to attached document, acknowledge our claim and arrange for reimbursement of the amount. That means you already paid.
Yes, Mr. Arbitrator. We have.
How do you comply with that clause?
Mr. Arbitrator, as the council submitted, in this case, the effect of consultation of the owner, even if the owner gave any opinion, whether supporting the claim or expressing his discontent, it would make no difference to the actual settlement of the claim, because the payment has to be made by the my client under the terms of carriage, clause 5 of the terms of carriage.
I would like to disagree with that. Where does it say you're legally bound to have paid that amount? Was there a court case? Was there an arbitration? Was there a formal legal proceeding?
The specific details of the amount are dealt with by the terms of carriage. So
right, and how was that? Like, did you seek an explanation as to how it was done? Was there? I mean, if there is no formal obligation or imposition to do so, I don't see how they were legally bound to make that payment. like as I mentioned to your co-counsel, that it appears that there could have been issues with the cargo itself, because only cargo of that one particular container was affected.
You
So
could have resisted this claim.
Yes.
You didn't have to pay it out. You could have resisted it, and you didn't.
You would go in an arbitration down. You would have an arbitration down the line with your contracting partner under the bill of lading. No contract can say you have to make payment when it's disputed.
Yeah.
Members of the tribunal, it is the council's submission here that the owner's opinion, owner's advice would have made no difference, since the owners were not a party to the terms of carriage.
So why do you have to consult with them? What's the point of what's the point of that clause if it's not going to make any difference?
In this particular case, since the owners are not a party to the terms of carriage, it makes no difference. However, in certain other cases, when dealing with claims of third parties, which involves the interests of both the owners and the charterers, certainly their consultation would have been required.
Well, the owners will have to pay 89,000. I would definitely say the interests are involved.
You have to consult before you make payment out. You know, you can't just sort of go settling under your bill of lading claim, and then just say, owners, hello, you know, you're going to have to pay this to us. That's not consultation. You should have consulted before you actually went ahead and made the settlement.
Tribunal, to answer your question, I will make a distinction between the underlying claim that my client paid to the merchant and the recovery claim. The recovery claim in question, and it is up to the decision of this tribunal to the exact amount that the owners will indemnify the charterers. And it is
the question is, if you haven't followed what is required under the charter party, because when you are saying that the cargo damage took place because the owners were liable because they did not fulfill their obligation, you are basically acting as an intermediary to settle, let's say in a separate manner. What steps did you take to protect the owner's interest instead of just going and saying, here's a check for $89,000? What did you do to mitigate the position for the owner instead of coming up? Because the owners therefore said, look, if you think it's something to do with the carriage or something to do with the charter party where I am liable, then look, please give me, you have to consult me before you pay more than $3,000. Admittedly, it is more than $3,000. Admittedly, the letter that you say that is consultation is asking not for consultation but reimbursement, right? And thirdly, the clause contemplates a notice, right? Under the charter party was proper notice given. Is there a provision for notice under the charter party that if you have to give a notice to owner, how the notice should be made? You sent an email out. Is that the method that was? I mean, it's a signed charter party, so we can't go behind anything.
As per the respondent's submission, the respondents are contending the fact that there was no consultation. Hence, I would address the tribunal on this matter itself.
First, before the consultation, if you read the clause H, you're saying that email at page 9 constitutes the consultation that you asked.
16th right? January.
Yeah. Now tell me, under the charter party, because paragraph 16H provides that time in respect of such claim, provided the charters give the owners immediate notice thereof. Was notice given? What constitutes notice under the charter party? How was notice contemplated to be given?
The charter party itself, as per the council's knowledge, is silent on what exactly constitutes a notice.
Please come to page 20.
Yeah, clause 22.
22, sorry. Clause 22. Page 20 of your thing.
Any notice shall be sent to Atlantis, Arthur Curry on Atlantis Empire.
Correct. There's an email address there. Have you sent it to that email address?
Members of the tribunal, it is argued here that in this round of hearing, the respondents have not sought any objection with the kind of notice, but rather the consultation. Hence, the council is only arguing on how this consultation is not required, since the respondents have not argued on the fact that the notice issued itself was not in a proper format. Further, I would like to say, and the arbitrator pointed out in his question, that what did we do? It is important to note here that the interests of my client and the owners were aligned. My client was the one paying the initial payment. It was in his best interest to conduct due diligence and ensure that the amount was actually legitimate. He had no incentive.
But what if the owner was not liable and you would get the same benefits of the exceptions under your bill of lading? If you had consulted the owner and the owner gave you that these are the reasons, would you not put that forward to down the line? After all, you're talking about the owner's money. It's not your money. Because you're saying he indemnifies me, I'm claiming his money. Would you not want to put those defenses forward to the cargo receiver on their claim? That is protecting the owner, not saying, hey, look, I paid you because that's the best thing I could have done. Now I'll claim it back.
Also, I want to disagree with your comment that there was no interest for the charterers to have paid the claimant. Well, in fact, their client's business is incentive enough to have made the payment. Like, I don't see that there's without, like, I can choose whatever I want to pay, how much ever I want to pay if I don't have to consult. I don't think that's what you're aiming at, are you?
No, Madam Arbitrator, here it is our submission that the claim itself arose from the terms of carriage and the owners were not a party. Hence, through Mr. Arbitrator's question, their response would have no actual legal bearing since they were not a party to the terms of carriage. It is only my client who was a party. And in this case, consultation should be read as information, which was clearly fulfilled by my client.
Well, sorry, please go ahead.
I don't think that's right. I mean, if it's consultation, you're going to say, look, we've got this claim. What should we do about it? Under your separate bill of lading contract, one of the things you could have done is actually take advantage of the limitations provided for under your terms, and I think that would have at least reduced the amounts payable.
I would also like to direct the bench to the response of the owners to our initial mail on 16 January, which they sent on the 26th of January. The whole response is on page number 8. Here, of the fact sheet, here it's clear that the owners clearly said they went ahead, accordingly we will proceed to close our file. The respondents in this case did not seek to advise the charterers.
1 second, where do they say, you're saying page 8?
Of the fact sheet.
Yeah, but don't read just the last sentence, read the whole letter, why he's closing the file, because he says that they were not liable and that you didn't inform him timely. That's why he's closing the file, because according to him, he's not liable to pay you. And not because he admits the claim.
And that the recovery claim, which is distinct from the underlying claim, is in front of the members of the tribunal to decide.
How can it be distinct from the claim stems from the claim of the receiver, which you have just paid without consultation, and now expecting the owners to pay up, even though it is beyond the $3,000 for which you were given a sanction to settle anything.
Members of the tribunal, it is very clear here that, again, I would redirect directly to my previous submission, that since the claim arose from the terms of carriage, the owners, any response by the owner wouldn't have changed our decision to make the payment.
Of course it must. Of course it must. Sorry, Sam. Yeah, please.
And
Sorry, I was just trying to say that I understand that the contract is separate. That just means that your client's claimant can't come after the ship owners, but that doesn't mean the liability doesn't fall on them to vet the actual claim. So irrespective of the response, if you have chosen your own whim to settle the claim, the owners can't be held accountable. You definitely have to prove that you are entitled to make that claim against the owner. That is under the charter party, so it's not separate.
The owner's liability will be, the recovery claim will be upon the decision of this tribunal. And that is the one that is in dispute between my client and the ship owners. The ship owners were still entitled. My client was still entitled. My client was still entitled to make the payment because they my client would have used the same reasons he had used to make the payment despite what the owners would have said.
Why?
He would have bore no impact.
Why? Let's put it this way: you are the owner. You have issued a carrier's. You've issued a liner bill of lading. So you are the owner so far as your bill of lading is concerned. What are your defenses that you've taken? You seem to, for me as an owner, I would say maybe the receiver is a big client of yours. So you just wanted for business reasons pay it off. And then anyways, there's a open checkbook with a P&I club of the owner. So he will pay whatever it is. What steps did you take?
I would just request, firstly, an extension of 1.5 minutes to answer the arbitrator's question and conclude my submissions. Mr. Arbitrator, it is very clear here that my client, and as per clarification number 6, if you refer to it, that the payment was made as per the invoices generated by the merchant and given to my client.
Again, the invoice, we are not on the fact of the quantification of the claim. It's the invoice payment. Isn't there a defense that you have to take that that damage did not take place because, for example, were those containers your containers or were they pre-packed by the shipper and sent to you for transportation?
Mr. Arbitrator, it is a submission here, and as my counsel one established, the damage to the cargo was actually caused due to problems in reefer temperature fluctuations. And
you have not established that, counsel.
Because as again, I would take the bench back to the 11th, 12th, and 13th of July and temperature logs, where it's clear that for 60 hours on one occasion, 44 hours on another occasion, the temperature was way above the set point. Hence, my client was obligated through terms of carriage under clause 5, the damage caused to the goods to make the payment. And counsel number 1 has already submitted that it is the owner's obligation now to reimburse my client of the same.
Counsel, your client would have been obliged to pay the claimant even if the cargo was damaged solely for your actions, that is providing a malfunctioning reefer. So that is not fall on the owner. So I do not think that it's completely unilateral. I think you have to have discussed it. The discussion includes
the tribunal can decide as to exactly who was liable. However, as the Madam Arbitrator said, my client would still have had to make the payment. And hence,
what about the limitation of 2 SDRs per gross weight, which is in your terms of carriage? I think why didn't you rely on that and get a lower figure?
If you refer to clause 17C1.
Sorry, I'm talking about, is that clause, I'm talking about your
terms of carriage.
Your terms of carriage under your bill of lading.
They were, though the amount of 2 SDR per kilo does not exactly equate to $90,000, there was still further costs of conducting the survey report, of insurance and freight that have to be added to this value. Hence, we believe clarification number 6 clearly says that there are invoices existing, and though not evidenced in this round of hearing, I'm sure if the respondents bring this up in the future rounds of hearings.
It's an absolute limit. I mean, you don't add these things on top of it. What's the point of a package limitation if you then put extra stuff on top? That's not how it works.
The fact is, Mr. Arbitrator, that insurance and freight, for example, are added to the Hague rules. Also, if you
counsel, what is the calculation of 2 SDR here? Did you calculate?
Special drawing to 1.4. Yeah, it's coming approximately to $33,000 as per the counsel's calculation.
You've almost paid thrice as much without going through formal proceedings where an arbitration could have declared that you paid the maximum liability, which was 2 SDR.
Madam Arbitrator, if you refer to clause 17C1 of the charter party, clause 17C1 clearly says that the owner can limit his liability to 667 SDR per package or unit, or 2 SDR per kilo, whichever is higher. Here it is submitted that
that is in the you're talking about The charter party, right?
The charter party itself. The
I'm
owners.
talking about the terms of carriage, your terms of carriage, as is Simon.
Since Madam Arbitrator, the council submits that the maximum liability the owner can be exempt of is 66.67 per package, which falls the amount so calculated as far exceeds $90,000 being claimed by the by my client. Hence, the owners cannot take the defense of limitation of liability. I would like to conclude my submissions if the tribunal so allows. I would like to conclude my submissions by giving the tribunal 3 numbers: 16, 17, and 23. 16 for the 16th of January, when my client clearly notified the respondent of the claim. 17 for clause 17 of the charter party, that clearly imposes on the respondent a responsibility to advise my client on reefer malfunctioning. And 23 for clarification number 23, that clearly states that my client made the payment only after giving information to the respondents. Thank you, members of the tribunal.
Thank you.
May I start with my submissions?
Yes, please do.
After respondent, am I audible to everyone?
Yes.
Greetings to the bench. This is the council on behalf of the respondents, that is the owners, in the present matter of TCL Denmark versus Atlantis Empire Hong Kong. The present counsel would be speaking for a duration of 24 minutes, while my co-counsel would be speaking for a duration of 90 minutes, keeping aside 2 minutes for the rebuttals. Counsel seeks permission to move forward with the issues at hand.
Please go ahead.
Indeed, Madam Arbitrator. The present counsel would be dealing with issue 1 and 2, while my co-counsel would be dealing with issue number 3. Before moving forward with my submissions, the counsel would like to state certain facts that are pertinent to my arguments. Firstly, that the monitoring logs have not been attached herewith in the problem, as per the clarification number 5 that was issued. Therefore, the facts are silent as to what was the cause of the temperature fluctuations, as well as the steps that were taken by the owners on the said alleged dates of 4th of July, 11th of July, 12th of July, and 27th of July in the present matter. Secondly, if the honorable members may please refer to clause number 13F, if you may please refer to page number 19.
Of the case study?
Yes, Madam Arbitrator, of the case study. Line 453, which clearly states that the owners have to maintain the full deck, engine room, and where appropriate refrigeration logs during the currency of the charter party. And the very next line also states that the charterers shall have full access to all the vessel logs, rough and official, covering this period.
Sorry, my apologies. Which page did you say?
Mr. Arbitrator, page number 17 of the hard copy and page number 19 of the soft copy. There is a difference of 2 pages.
Just give me the clause number.
13F.
Thank you.
Indeed, Mr. Arbitrator. With respect to the same, the council would like to move forward with the third point, being that the charterers were the ones who had supplied the reefer containers in the present matter. Moreover, the cases which have been relied upon by my learned counsels, which is the case of Foreman and Ellams, as well as Maury King versus Hughes, wherein the refrigeration facility was at fault. The refrigeration facility of the vessel. In the present matter, the present matter pertains to the reefer containers, which have a refrigeration unit of its own, which is being contended as having been malfunctioned by the present council. With these facts as the premise, the council would like to move forward with the arguments. Moving forward with the first issue, which is whether the owners have performed their part of the agreement with regards to monitoring or taking due care of the refrigerated cargo or the reefer containers. The council submits that the owners have performed their part of the agreement with respect to the same. This is because they are not to be held responsible for the damage caused to the cargo under the charter party, because the timely repairs were undertaken by the vessel's crew, thereby complying with their obligations as set out under clause number 17. A and clause number 17B. Moreover, there was a reefer container malfunction for which the owners cannot be held liable. And secondly, the vessel was seaworthy, both with respect to being physically sound as well as there being competent crew on board. The council would like to move forward with the first submission, that is, owners are not responsible for the damage caused to the cargo under the charter party. If the honorable members of the tribunal may please refer to page number 3 of the case study under the section background of claims. It is page number 1 in the hard copy. Under the section background of claims, that is there, the second paragraph clearly states that damage to cargo was caused because of temperature fluctuations. It is also an accepted fact that there existed two possibilities with respect to the damage being caused to the cargo. A being the inadequate monitoring by the vessel's crew, and B being the reefer container malfunction because of problems with the reefer condenser fan motor. The council would like to also establish that there are two categories that can be drawn with respect to the said malfunctions that took place in the present matter. The first being A, that the loss of power which occurred on 5th of July, and B being the loss of coolant that happened on 13th and 29th of July. With respect to the first loss of power malfunction that occurred on 5th of July, immediate steps were undertaken by the vessel's crew. Thereby, if you may please refer to page number 18 of the case study, line 374, clause 11D. It is page number 16 of the hard copy. Clause 11D, which clearly states that the owners have to ensure that the refrigeration facilities are working in good working order. Therefore, in the light of the same said obligation, the owners troubleshooted the said unit when it was found tripped. The action with regards to the same can be found on page number 128, wherein the Malreef report is attached. If the honorable members may please refer to the same. It is page number 126 of the soft copy, of the hard copy, sorry. Under the column E1, wherein it states the action that was undertaken to resolve the said malfunction, it has been clearly stated that troubleshooting was done when the unit was found tripped by the vessel's crew and the power was back on. Thereby, the council submits that the vessel's crew performed their part of the obligation with respect to repairing the said malfunction, and also they also fulfilled their part of the obligation under clause 11D. With respect to the second category of malfunction that occurred, that is loss of coolant that happened on 13th and 29th of July, it is submitted that the vessel's crew undertook the same repairs with respect to the reefer container malfunction that occurred. There was a loss of coolant on these days because of the reefer container malfunction, and the said reefer containers were supplied by the charterers in the present matter, for which the owners cannot be held liable.
Can I just ask you one thing? If you see the letter on page 6, they've set out how long each of these outages were. You know, the malfunction continued for 33 hours, 100 hours, but your repairs took only 3 hours. So what were you doing for the 30 hours?
Mr. Arbitrator, for these said malfunctions and off-power limits or off-power durations that the charters have very well laid out in their mail, it is submitted, as I submitted in my in the starting of my submissions, that the monitoring logs we have not been provided. The said damages, the said malfunction, which as an accepted fact from both the sides of the parties, took place on 5th, 13th, and 29th of July. And as and when these said malfunctions were detected, the vessel's crew repaired the said malfunctions and also generated the said Malreef reports. The very date on the Malreef reports clearly indicates the date of July, 13th of July, and 29th of July, corresponding with the dates of the malfunction as it has been alleged.
Fair enough.
Forward, that there existed loss of coolant on 13th and 29th of July. At this point, the council would like to explain the very functioning of a reefer container. It is submitted that a reefer container has a refrigeration unit of its own, as the council previously mentioned. The said refrigeration unit has various sections. one such section being the condenser section, wherein the condenser fan motor is located. The condenser fan motor is responsible for circulating cool air. The condenser fan motor is responsible for circulating cool air onto the compressor and to ensure that the evaporator coils in which the refrigerant is located does not overheat. In the present matter, there has been an overheating of the evaporator coils and there was a leakage of the refrigerant. Please refer to page numbers 129 and 130 of the case study, and of the hard copy, it is page numbers 127 and 128. The Malric reports which have been attached. If you may please refer.
But that doesn't still answer my co-arbitrator's question. The question is that under the Charter Party, you had an obligation to monitor daily, minimum.
Yes, Mr. Arbitrator.
Yeah, and some of these malfunctions happen 100 hours or whatever. Now, if you read your malfunction report, each of them are saying during morning round. That's where you found it. So were you not doing your part of the work of monitoring daily? Because if you had monitored the one which is for 100 hours, which has been going on, and you only found the malfunction on the third day, so therefore you didn't, if you had monitored as per the Charter Party on the daily basis, you would have found out malfunctioning on the first day and repaired it, and this damage may not have taken place. Because at the end of the day, you've taken the obligation for repairing those containers through the voyage and have competent staff. So how are you, therefore, are you saying that you did not? How do you explain the 100 hours delay?
Indeed, Mr. Arbitrator, the Council would like to explain this particular issue. Firstly, by stating that A, the monitoring logs have not been provided, herewith in the problem. Secondly, with respect to the morning rounds, they were taking place only on 5th of July, not on 13th or on 29th of July. On 13th and 29th of July, the Malric reports clearly indicate that there was a loss of coolant. And
but this all comes out of the morning round. You read your reports, everyone says during morning round. During morning round and on the 13th, and again on the next one, during morning round. And that's what's contemplated under the Charter Party, that you will make daily inspection and there will be some light which will trigger, which will show there's a malfunctioning, which you will then rectify.
Right, Council. Also, you keep adding this line saying the monitoring logs were not provided. Yes, well noted. But had it been provided, what is it that you're trying to establish that you would have done had it been provided? You keep saying that. So what are you trying to establish with that point?
Honorable members of the tribunal, it is submitted that the temperature fluctuations that occurred were because of the reefer container malfunction. That is, with respect to there being issues with the reefer condenser fan motor. As the Council previously explained, the very functioning of the condenser fan motor, that once it's not working properly, it would lead to overheating, and thereby there would be an increase that would be recorded in the temperature sensor. Moreover, the Council may also explain that these temperature fluctuations also coincide with the defrost periods that have been laid down in the event logs.
One moment, I just want to stop you again, sorry. The first, I think it's the first Malric report. Nonetheless, the one on page 128, which is dated 5th July, it states that the report was issued on 5th and the next port was on 6th. Right, next arrival at the next port. So had you informed TCL, the details seem to be on top, then they could have, being the experts and providers of the containers themselves, then they could have done the needful to have arranged for whatever was necessary on day one itself. So why were they not informed?
Madam Arbitrator, it is submitted that via the Malric reports, the charterers, that is TCL, they were kept in the loop. They were informed that what malfunction arose and what repairs were conducted. And since via these Malric reports, TCL also had access to these temperature logs, as was previously mentioned, that was contained under clause 13F, that they very well had the access to these temperature logs. Moreover, the vessel's crew had already repaired the said unit. Therefore,
to the best of your, so then I can state that the liability then falls on the crew, because they repaired to the best of their abilities, which we do not know, and that could have been the cause of the further malfunctioning of the next 2 times.
Madam Arbitrator, it is submitted that the crew undertook their best endeavors to repair the said malfunctions. That is, on the first of occasion, when there was a unit was found tripped, there was a circuit break, they very well went ahead and troubleshooted the same. Power was back on the very same day. With respect to the 13th of July, when the said malfunction occurred, when there was an overheating of the coils, the vessel's crew, they undertook a leak test. Once the leak test was done, they very well supplied, if the honorable members may please refer to Malreef reports once again, on page numbers 127 and 128. Of the PDF, it is 129 and 130. The last column on the right hand side very well indicates that on 13th of July, once the leak test was conducted, 0.6 kgs of freon gas was supplied by the vessel's crew. And on the second occasion, 1.6 kgs of freon gas was supplied. Considering the very temperature sensitive nature of bananas, they very well conducted the said repairs to ensure that the said malfunction was corrected.
Right, so this is working on air supply, right? So this is what you were, this was the repair that was conducted, correct?
Indeed, Madam Arbitrator, this is the repair that was conducted.
Correct. So two questions here. One was there a reefer technician on board? And two, the actual issue seems to be of temperature fluctuations, not of air supply. So how do you state that the repairs were actually related? Did the ship owner's crew verify with the charterers who provided the containers? Did they seek their advice? Was anything done?
Madam Arbitrator, it is submitted that the factual matrix is silent if there was a reefer technician on board or not. Therefore, the council cannot comment upon the same. With respect to the second limb of your question, that is, if the Honorable Madam Arbitrator may please repeat the second limb of the question.
Right. So you mentioned that you were talking about the repairs, which was talking about the air supply issue, correct? Leakage of air supply. Right. So how did that affect the temperature?
Madam Arbitrator, there was a leak test that was done, wherein the overheating of the evaporator coils was caused because of the condenser fan motor not working properly. The evaporator coil overheated, there was a leakage of the refrigerant, upon which a leak test was done, and the refrigerant was once again supplied on the said occasions of 13 and 29 by the vessel's crew.
Okay, you can move on.
Can I ask a clarification? On that email from charterers, which I think we've already referred to, it's on page 6 of the case.
Indeed, Mr. Arbitrator.
Yeah, there are these references to substantial periods of power being off. Is it your contention that is actually that those statements are incorrect, and that that the charters are just making these statements up?
Mr. Arbitrator, it is the present council's contention that since it is the present council's contention that it is an accepted fact that the damage occurred or the malfunction occurred on 5th, 11th and on 5th, 13th and 29th July. With respect to the other malfunctions that took place, which so as to say my learned councils and in their mails they have stated so, the monitoring logs are not available with respect to the same. Temperature fluctuations could be caused because of other reasons also apart from the malfunction being caused. That is, they could coincide with the defrost periods that are present in a reefer container. And
so, but what about the supply of electricity to the containers from the ship? Now, that seems to be quite an important thing. And
Mr. Arbitrator.
And the evidence, are you saying that the evidence from that email we shouldn't take any notice of it because we don't have the monitoring logs?
Indeed, Mr. Arbitrator, the same stands disputed and it should not be taken into consideration. Taking into account that the temperature logs and the Malreef reports are very well available with the Honorable Arbitral Tribunal to adjudicate upon the said dispute. And that is what the present council's argument is.
So, yeah, but are you saying that there is is there any other evidence about the lack of supply of electricity to these containers?
Mr. Arbitrator, answering your question, the temperature logs clearly indicate that there was a loss of power supply on 4th of July, wherein the power status is clearly stated to be false. However, it is the present council's submission that it could also have happened because of plugging and unplugging of the reefer containers, for which the vessel's crew were acting as the charterer servants.
Do you have any evidence of that?
No, Mr. Arbitrator, but since the monitoring logs are not available, there exist two possibilities. That either it could have been because of that the unit was found that the same situation happened on 5th itself, or it could have been because of the unplugging and plugging of the reefer containers.
And what about the later period of power being off, which is referred to in the email, the period after the 5th of July? I think there's another one of 100 hours worth of power being interrupted.
Mr. Arbitrator, it is submitted that there was not any off power on these particular occasions. There was only loss of coolant that occurred on 13th and on 29th of July.
So what they're saying in that email is incorrect?
Indeed, Mr. Arbitrator.
Thank you.
The Council would like to move forward with the submissions. If the honourable members may please refer to page number 21 of the case study, lines 698 and 699, as well as the italicized paragraph above it, which clearly states that irrespective of the reefer malfunction, the owners have to undertake their best endeavours to repair these said malfunctions. It is submitted that in the present matter, the vessel's crew have clearly undertaken their best endeavours on 13th and 29th of July, whereby when a leak test was conducted, they supplied the said freon gas to correct the said malfunction. Therefore, it is submitted that the owners cannot be held responsible for the damage caused to the cargo under the charter party. The Council seeks permission to move forward with the second submission, that is, the vessel was seaworthy in the present matter. The Council would like to, indeed, Madam Arbitrator, the Council would like to deal with this issue in a twofold manner. That is, seaworthiness has two aspects attached to it. First being the physical soundness of the vessel, and second being the competency of crew on board. In the present matter, with respect to the physical soundness of the vessel, the honourable members of the tribunal may please refer to page number 53 of the soft copy and page number 51 of the hard copy. Under part 3, last paragraph under the section of reefer containers, it has been clearly stated that 7 kilowatt per every 40 feet reefer containers was supplied. There also existed 600 reefer sockets on board to supply the ship's power to the reefer containers in the present matter. In addition to this, there was also a reefer monitoring system on board to monitor the said containers at least once daily. Hence, it is submitted that the vessel was physically sound in the present matter. With respect to the competency of crew on board, it is submitted that in light of the prior submissions made by the Council.
Council, are you saying, just tell me, what you just read out, is that the condition of the vessel you're saying that the vessel was in when the vessel, before the voyage?
Please clarify, Mr. Arbitrator.
You just read out page 51, the reefer container, and said that the vessel was with all of these conditions. Are you saying
Yes,
there's like a report which says that the vessel is in this condition?
Mr. Arbitrator, it is stated in part number 3, which as per, and part number 3 is, if the honourable members may please refer to the very first page of the charter party, which states that part number 1 and part number 3 would take precedence over part number 2.
Yeah.
And it is the present Council's case that the vessel was very well with these. It had all these set technicalities. It was very well had all these power supply attached.
What evidence do you have for that? So you're just reading out a charter party clause. This is what you're supposed to be doing at the beginning of the voyage. What's your evidence that this was done at the beginning of the voyage?
Mr. Arbitrator, this is the very part of the charter party, and this is our obligation that we have fulfilled.
I appreciate that's your obligation. Now, the charter party was signed in 2016. The carriage took place in 2018. So, and the obligation is at the beginning of each voyage, because it's time charter with multiple voyages taking place. So where is your evidence which says that your vessel was in these conditions when you started off at the, if you're arguing that it is in a seaworthy condition at the beginning of each voyage, and you're relying on part 3, now you have to prove that yes, when we began the voyage, everything was in order.
Indeed,
I can't
Mr.
just sit on this
Arbitrator.
page and say yes, it was. This is a 2016 page.
Indeed, Mr. Arbitrator, the council would seek an extension of 2 minutes to answer this question as well as to complete the second issue.
Right.
With respect to the said question asked by Mr. Arbitrator, it is submitted that the vessel was seaworthy at the very beginning of the voyage. This is because there was no issue or any malfunction that was detected at the very beginning of the voyage. The said temperature fluctuation, the said temperature logs as well as the Maldive reports are an evidence for the same, that the vessel was seaworthy. With respect, if the honorable members may please permit, the council would like to move forward with the second issue. With respect, may I?
Yes.
Issue number 2, which is whether it should be expected of the owner or the vessel's crew to advise the charterers in case there was a reefer malfunction, or was it only their duty to maintain the logs? It is submitted that it cannot be expected of the owner or the vessel's crew to advise the charterers even in case of a reefer malfunction. It is the present council's case that the business transactions are the business transactions take place wherein both the parties have to come together to serve the very end of the said business transaction. And that is the reason why the charter parties, they are constructed the way they are, wherein the vessel's crew, whether it would be acting as the charter servants or the owner servants, the respective obligations and rights, everything is clearly laid down. With respect to the reefer containers in the present matter, the vessel's crew only had the obligation to repair it. That is, they have to undertake the best endeavors to repair the same, which they clearly did, as the present council submitted in the prior submissions. Therefore, and they were also informed of the said repairs and the malfunctions that took place via the Maldive reports, and also they had full access to the temperature logs too. Therefore, in a situation wherein the owners have to also advise the charterers with respect to the reefer malfunction, it would place an insurmountable burden on them to do the same. Therefore, it should not be expected to advise the charterers, therefore it should not be expected of the owner of the vessel's crew to advise the charterers in case of a reefer malfunction.
Can I just ask you one more thing? Now, forget all this. In any case, you're a bailee of that of the containers. Now, as a bailee, you wouldn't have any duty to tell the bailor that there was a problem with the containers?
Mr. Arbitrator, to answer the said question, the council seeks an extension of 30 seconds.
Okay.
Mr. Arbitrator, it is submitted that with respect to the reefer containers, indeed the owners were the bailee, but as Mr. Arbitrator clearly pointed out, that they weren't, they also had an obligation to inform the charterers in case of a reefer malfunction. The owners, as the bailee, have clearly done so via the Maldive reports, wherein on the alleged dates of damage that occurred on 5th, 13th, and 29th of July, they very well sent these Maldive reports and informed the charterers regarding the same, therefore clearly fulfilling their obligation even as a bailee. The council would now like to hand over to my co-counsel for issue number 3. It was a pleasure arguing before this honorable tribunal.
Thank you.
Good evening, honorable members of the tribunal. Am I audible to everybody?
Yeah.
Yes. Greetings to the honorable members of the tribunal. This is the council on behalf of the respondents, and as previously stated by my co-counsel, the council would like to reiterate a few facts relevant to the issue at hand. That both the parties in question entered into multiple correspondences after the issuance of the first notice on the 16th of January 2019, and the charter party also stipulates the clause that requires the charterers to consult the owners in regards of a settlement of a claim. Keeping these facts in mind, the Council today will be dealing with the issue that the charterers did not fulfill their part of the agreement with regards to notifying or informing the owners with regards to the claim. The Council would attempt to establish the same in a twofold manner. Firstly, that the charterers did not consult the owners with regards to the settlement of the claim, and secondly, notice of protest was not issued. The Council seeks permission to move with the first submission.
Yeah.
The Council would like to draw the Honorable Bench's attention to page number 18 of the case study, which stipulates the very much discussed clause 16H of the Charter Party, that pensions, as previously stated by the Council, any payment over $3,000 needs to be made with post-consultation. And my learned counsel, as previously mentioned, that the requirement of consultation was not there, since the opinion of the owners would not have made a difference. However, honorable members, the owners and the charterers themselves have agreed to this condition, and this plays a vital role in the owners entering into a contract. In the absence of the same, the charterers can claim any amount and pay any amount to their clients and claim the compensation of the same from the owners, without taking into consideration their views. However, the Council here would also like to point out the ambiguity that surrounds the word consultation in the instant matter. In the present, since there is no premise laid down as to what comprises of the process of fair consultation, in the presence of same, the Council would like to rely on Terence Colin's Time Charterers, 7th edition, page number 45 of the compendium, which states that in case of the ambiguity in the terms of the Charter Party, the relevant terms to rely or determine the intentions of the party are the certainty and desirability of the construction of the basic principle, and the same can be done by relying on previous judicial decisions or where a term has to be performed by one of the parties in order to act as a precedent to allow the other party to perform their part of the agreement. As laid down in previous judicial decisions, the premise of consultation, as mentioned in the case of Dudley MBC versus SSCLG, as mentioned on page 48 of the compendium for the reference of the honorable members of the tribunal, it was laid down that for a consultation to be proper, it must include sufficient reasons to allow the party to make an intelligent response. In the instant matter, honorable members of the tribunal, the charterers, via the email dated 16 January 2019, merely conveyed to the owners that as per their evidences, they find the claim to be genuine. However, the documents that they relied on to reach the said conclusion have not been mentioned. In furtherance to this, the charterers mentioned the relied documents on the 16th of April 2019, which was way beyond the expiration period of 15 days, the cap which was provided by the charterers to the owners themselves. It also stipulates that if the charterers were not averse to sharing the same information regarding the claim, the same should have been done in the initiation of the first notice itself. Secondly, adequate time must be provided. Honorable members of the tribunal, as per stipulated in clause 16H, any payment over $3,000 and the claim in the instant matter is nearly 30 times that amount. However, 15 days would have amounted to a reasonable amount of time if the charterers provided the owners with sufficient evidence or documentation in order to allow them to formulate their views on the same. However, as previously mentioned, there was lack on providing the documentation, which was only provided on the 16th of April, post the expiration of the 15 days. Furthermore, it is of utmost importance here to point out that the product of consultation must be taken or duly considered when the final decision regarding the instant matter is being made. In the case, the Council feels it's of utmost importance to bring to the notice of these honorable members of the tribunal the language of the mail dated 16 January 2019, mentioned on page 10 of the case study, paragraph 3, which states that we intend to settle the claim in full. Please let us have your agreement on the same before we conclude the claim in the next 15 days. The usage of the word intent and agreement here specify that the charterers have already decided on making good the payment in full and are seeking for a mere concurrence, as is the meaning of the word agreement, and not consultation. Therefore, even though the owners replied on the 26th of January 2019, which was on the 10th day of the initiation of the first notice, their opinion was never really taken into consideration. Fourthly, mentioning the gunning principles of consultation, as have also been mentioned on page 56 of the compendium, which state that consultation should be done at the formative stages of the agreement, of the formulation of the proposal. In the instant matter, honorable members, the charterers should have consulted the owners when the possibility of damage and the quantum of damage was in question, and not when.
Can I just clarify? When did you get when did they send the claim documents to you?
Indeed, Mr. Arbitrator, the charterer sent the first notice of the claim on 16 January.
Did they send the documents?
No, Mr. Arbitrator. The documents were only sent on the mail of 16th of April.
Right.
And therefore,
and how did you respond to that initial notification?
Mr. Arbitrator, as has been mentioned on page number, in the mail dated 26 January, which was sent by the owners to the charterers, as for your reference, has been mentioned on page number 8 of the case study, the charterers, the owners clearly, based on the report that they were available because of the master of the ship, they denied all the claims since the master of the ship was not available of the quantum of damage or the presence of damage itself, since there was clear lack of evidence and the survey report was conducted on the 8th of August. Therefore, based on the information available to the owners at that time, the owners clearly negated the claim. However, the charterer still went ahead and made the payment in full.
You could have asked for the claim documents when you got notified about notified on the earlier in January. Why didn't you?
Indeed, Mr. Arbitrator, the owners clearly pointed out in the mail in question that the claim file was insufficient, as is mentioned on page number 8, line 4. As has been mentioned in the said mail, that the owners found the claim files to be insufficient, and the reply was also sent on the 10th day, which was well within the time of the charterers, and the charterers still did not reply to the same up until the 16th of April.
Do we know when the charterers actually made the settlement?
No, Mr. Arbitrator, the exact date of the payment of the settlement of the claim, the factual matrix is silent.
Can I, if you can, sorry, Simon, can I, you said that they sent you the documents in April, but if you just read the emails, first of all, as Simon correctly pointed out, as on 16th of January when they wrote to you, they asked you your concurrence. Obviously, you could have gone back, let's go through the documents. I mean, you can't really have a hard and fast rule that, just because they've asked for agreement, that means everything has been let go and therefore now it's a fait accompli. But in fact, just following the email they sent you, they sent another email to you, again, just above the first email, the original message and they said, please find below draft mail for recovery of so-and-so, kindly find attached documents and help us pursue the recovery. So they obviously sent you the documents on 16th of January.
Indeed, Mr. Arbitrator. However, there have not been mentioned any documents that have been attached to the said mail. And the attached.
I mean, I don't know what else. Doesn't have to specify, but the email says, please find below draft mail for recovery of claim, which is what they want to send to through the brokering channel, which you've been corresponding. Kindly find attached documents and help us pursue the recovery. I would take, when they say documents, they've attached the claim documents.
Mr. Arbitrator, the documents that have been attached have not been mentioned as to what are these documents that have been attached. And since the owners are not aware of the presence of the damage, the survey report first came into the notice of the charterers, of the owners, on the 16th of April.
Counsel, sorry, I would have to agree with Simon here because if the mail does say that documents were attached, and as Simon said, why don't you just ask if something was missing? That does fall on you. Additionally, you said your co-counsel said monitoring logs were missing, or not missing, were not presented, but it is available on deck on the vessel. So you have clearly a history as to what happened when you were doing your daily monitoring, as you stated you've done. So you have more information than, than is described here, but then you have it and you can come up to a reasonable conclusion. You could have voiced out your thoughts at the onset instead of waiting.
Madam Arbitrator, as was already mentioned by my co-counsel, that as was also mentioned by the honorable members of the tribunal, that there were pre-shipment issues with the cargo that was detected in the survey of the charterers themselves, and the temperature fluctuations that took place on board were duly rectified by the owners. Hence, it was also stated by the owners in their mail that they found the claim files to be insufficient and not absent. And there was no reply received by the owners from the side of the charterers post the mail of 26 January. And the charterers went ahead with the settlement of the claim.
No, but can I just ask you, you see, they made their first claim reference to you on 16 January, to which you said your claim is incomplete, whatever. And then you said, I'm closing my file. So you effectively told them, I don't want to discuss this further.
Based on the evidences, Mr. Arbitrator, that were available with the owners, they went ahead to close the file. However, in the reply on the 20th of April that is sent by the owners to the charterers, they have clearly mentioned that since the charterers are still going ahead to pursue the said claim, they have opened their files again in order to
And closed it. We're
However,
opening it, we opened it, now we've read it, found nothing important, closed it.
You see, the intention to discuss is missing.
Mr. Arbitrator, as was laid out in the has been interpreted by the High Court of Justice, London, that consultation has been interpreted as a friendly discussion. However, to state the mail of 16 January, where the charterers are merely looking for an agreement on their opinion on the claim, the forum for discussion was never really opened.
It's open for you to say, hold on, if you want to have can we have a meeting on this? When you know that there's a potential claim coming up your way, you've been put on notice of it, they haven't settled it as on that date, you have all the documentation, they have informed you of wanting to pay, but yet not paid. You've got 15 days. And it's also, the onus is just not on him to, consultation is mutually done by both sides. What steps did you take other than saying, no, I don't think there's a case, I'm closing the file? Knowing that 3 times on your route, there was malfunctioning, and therefore there could be an alleged claim. Instead of looking at it in a proper manner, your answer has consistently been, thank you very much, we looked at it, it's not our fault, goodbye.
Indeed, Mr. Arbitrator, to answer your question, the council would like to say the steps that the owners took in doing their part in the process of consultation was that we replied on the mail, the said mail, within the stipulated time period on the 10th day. However, in the remaining 5 days, there was no correspondence received from the part of the charterers, thus leading to the expiration of the window that was implied by the charterers on the owners themselves.
But normally when you get a claim letter like that with 15 days and you need time, you write back to the other party saying, thank you very much, we note so and so, these documents are missing. Accordingly, we'd like to have these documents, whereafter we will discuss, and therefore your timeline is not accepted, we are in consultation. What kind of, what was your proactive step towards the claim coming up your way other than just saying, sorry, bye?
No, Mr. Arbitrator, to answer your question, as was stated clearly in the mail of 26 January, that we attached the evidences as is visible in the body of the mail itself, where the charterers have said that they, on the basis of the evidences received. However, the owners on the other hand, have clearly mentioned that the reefer was working satisfactory as base of the attached log. Further, the unit was found trip in the morning of the 5th July and was corrected, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, but in fact, if you read the intention of consultation is lacking on the owner's part rather than on the charterer's part. Look at, after they sent you all the papers and you've gone through everything, your reply to them is, secondly, you obviously failed to inform us of the alleged claim. And then finally, in the light of the foregoing, we conclude. So you've concluded, they're at least asking you for agreement, they're asking you to discuss. You conclude that our liability is not engaged in this matter and that we cannot entertain your claim. Accordingly, we close our file.
Mr. Arbitrator, the same has been done in order, based on the evidences that were available with the owners. Based on whatever evidences were available with the owners formulated their views in the said matter. And on the receiving of the reply from the charterers, they still opened their files again and opened all the thorough analysis of the evidences that were available and investigated the claim for the same.
You could have gone back to charterers and said, look, we've looked at these documents which you provided us, we don't think you should be settling this claim because either there's no liability, or if you are going to have to settle it, you should be taking the limitation point, and you didn't.
Mr. Arbitrator, the owners clearly did the same on the 26th of January. However, there was no any way for them to know that despite them providing the evidences as to why the claim should not be settled, the charterers would go ahead and settle the claim
But
with the third party.
you just said owners, what Simon just said is that you could go back asking them not to settle, etc. You said, yes, that is what owners did. Please show me any correspondence with one line saying that please
I'm actually searching for that.
Yeah, please, I've searched it. That's why I'm asking you. That please
Indeed,
show me
Mr.
one
Arbitrator.
line.
It has not been expressly stated. However,
so you don't have to expressly state, but they must have to expressly consult as per definition of a judgment.
No, Mr. Arbitrator, what the council here is saying that the consultation clause is a clause that is agreed upon by both the parties themselves while entering the charter party, and it is not the owners, and it is not on the owners to be aware that that such a big amount of claim, that is nearly $90,000, will be settled by the charterers without taking into consideration.
But they didn't settle. When they wrote to you in January 16, they didn't settle. They had brought you were aware of the fact that there was a malfunctioning. A claim has arisen. You are a ship owner. You are dealing with claims coming every day. There's a presumption that you will have knowledge that there may be damaged cargo. Some claim may come up or not. They made you aware of that claim.
Indeed,
they informed you that this is the claim coming up, and this payment has to be made. What more are they supposed to do?
Mr. Arbitrator, as the charterers had not made good the settlement of the claim on the initiation of the first mail, however, when the owners replied on the 10th day of the issuance of the first notice, which was in the time span that as previously mentioned by the council, however, the first page of the background of claim clearly states that TCL Denmark had to settle a claim with their customers. So the claim had already been settled with post the expiration of the 15 days, whereas the opinion of the opinion of the owners was not taken into consideration.
The owner's opinion was that we are not liable. I'm closing my file.
Indeed, Mr.
And then the charters would have had to have dealt with a time limitation with their claimants, and with a view to mitigate costs, they settled as they thought best. But you had no response for that. So, when they were trying to seek your counsel to actually discuss the matter, you had provided no feedback. So how are they to have?
Madam Arbitrator, the claim has arisen 5 months post the delivery of the goods at the port of discharge.
What is the in the bill of lading? You've set out in your charter party that they can't agree to the Hamburg rules, so they have to either agree to the Hague-Visby rule or the Hague rules. So what is the limitation under that for initiation of a suit or for intimation? 1 year, or by agreement can be extended. So why is 5 months taken to be a period that, a very, long period, etc.? He could have made a claim after 365 days. On the 365th day, file a suit.
Indeed, Mr. Arbitrator, the council is not contending that the charterers are delayed or are bound by time, that they have raised the claim post 5 months. The council here is contending that that the owners were never informed about the happening of or occurring of such a claim itself. And
when they were informed, they informed you and said, "Look, we have to pay. Please, can you agree?"
Exactly the point of the council, Mr. Arbitrator, that the charterers asked for a mere agreement. So they never really opened a forum for consultation or discussion anyways about the alleged incident. If the Honorable Tribunal is satisfied, the council would like to proceed.
Yep.
Therefore, the council humbly submits that the charterers did not perform their part of the agreement in regards to consultation. Moving ahead with the second submission, that notice of protest was not raised. The council seeks an extension of 1 minute to wrap up the submission.
Yes, proceed.
Notice of protest, as stated in clause page number 18, clause 14b, subclause 4, the presence of the Himalaya clause, which states that the Himalaya clause, the circular indemnity clause, giving the owners the benefit of the bill of lading terms and conditions. And in the present matter, since there was no issuance of the note of protest, it was reasonable for the owners to infer that the goods were delivered at the state mentioned in the bill of lading. In furtherance to this, the council would like to bring to your notice the case of Chimbasco Pan Nation Petrochemical versus Arkstar Ship Management mentioned on page 63 of the compendium, which stated that in the absence of the claim being the notice of protest being raised in the stipulated period of time, the claim stood extinguished. However, honorable members of the tribunal, in the instant matter.
Pause there. Just pause there. Tell me where's the provision that this time limit for notice which was supposed to be given to you?
Mr. Arbitrator, if the honorable bench may please turn to clause 9 on page number 64. I beg your apology. Page number 66 of the case study. Which states that the notice of protest should be raised within at the time of delivery. Prior to that, in 3 days.
I don't think you can take advantage of this clause.
Mr. Arbitrator, since both the agreements in this matter are being read together, since the bill of lading has been issued under the charter party, and as was held in the case of Administer Shipping versus Anglo-Saxon, when two agreements are read together, only the clauses which are irrelevant or incapable of being held stand negated. And the presence of the Himalaya clause also states that the chart owners should get the benefit of the terms and conditions in the bill of lading. And since the council is short on time, the council would like to submit that if there are no further questions in the same, that the charterers did not fulfill their part of the agreement with regards to informing or notifying the owners with regards to this claim amount. The council seeks permission to move to the prayer. Wherefore, in light of the issues raised, arguments advanced, and authorities cited, may this honorable tribunal be pleased to hold that the charterers, the owners fulfill their part of the agreement with regards to monitoring or taking due care of the reefer container or refrigerated cargo, declare that it was not the duty of the owners to advise the charterers in respect to the malfunctioning of the reefer, declare that the charterers did not perform its part of the agreement with regards to notifying or informing the owners about the claim, hold that Timaeus Cargo Lines is liable for the payment of $89,918.42 US for the damage to the cargo, and award the cost of arbitration in favor of Atlantis Empire Hong Kong, and or pass any other order that it may deem fit in the best interest of justice, equity, and good conscience. And for this act of kindness, the respondents shall duty bound humbly forever pray.
Thank you. Before we close, I just wanted to mark up that you need to read clause 9 fully. Because clause 9 doesn't say there's any extinguishment. It says that prima facie.
Indeed,
and it says in any event, you can file a suit within 1 year.
Indeed, Mr. Arbitrator, the council mentioned...
Just that much, just so that there should be a correction, that you don't go back thinking that the clause is actually read the way you read it.
Mr. Arbitrator, the council relied on the case of...
it was just a clarification. I'm not...
It was an honor pleading before this honorable tribunal.
Thank you.
Members of the tribunal, can the claimant go ahead with the rebuttals? I would like to start off by reading from line 686 of the Charter Party. Clause 17b. The owners shall, whether permitting, monitor and record the performance of refrigerated units minimum once daily. My opposing counsel has claimed that they did not have access to monitoring logs and did not know exactly when the temperature was rising. It is submitted that under the obligation of 17b, the crew was responsible to be aware at least once a day of the temperature condition in each container. My opposing counsel has also taken great pains and stated how the vessel's crew performed best endeavors and repaired all the issues with the container. It is submitted that since the cargo itself is temperature sensitive, best endeavors cannot be read when they have been taken after a time period that will greatly affect the damage caused to the cargo. It is clear here that despite best endeavors being taken of 100 after 100 hours or after 60 hours, as the cases are on the 11th to 13th of July and 27th to 29th of July, the cargo still, the cargo being temperature sensitive was still damaged. Further, the opposing counsels cannot take the defense that there were issues with container malfunction, since even if there were certain technical glitches, under 17A2, it was the obligation of the respondents to ensure that the container was maintained in a manner fit to carry out the purpose of the voyage, that is to carry safely the temperature sensitive cargo. Thank you, members of the tribunal.
Am I audible? The council seeks permission to move ahead with the rebuttals. The rebuttal, the council, greetings to the bench once again. The council would be moving forward the rebuttal in a point-to-point manner. The first being that if the honorable bench would once again may please direct their attention to page number 19 of the case study. And once again, the council would like to point to clause 17B, lines 698 and 699, as well as the italicized paragraph above it. An inference can be drawn that irrespective of the reefer malfunction that takes place, the owners have to undertake their best endeavors to repair the said malfunction. In the present matter, the said malfunctions occurred because of the faulty reefer containers that were supplied by the charterers themselves, as has already been mentioned in my submissions. And therefore, even after those said reefer container malfunctions, the owners fulfilled their part of the obligation, considering the very nature, the temperature sensitive nature of the Cavendish bananas on board. They conducted the said repairs on the alleged dates of damage, that is on 5th July, 13th July, and 29th July, and also sent the malreef reports with respect to the same. Therefore, it is humbly submitted that the owners have clearly performed their part of the obligations, and the charterers did not perform their part of the obligation with respect to notifying us about the claim. Thank you.
And being with us here today, even though it's virtual. We wish the best of luck for the participating teams. This will be the end of the session. Thank you.